Hello, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast live stream. We're here to talk about the very unsurprising and uneventful cuts of the day. But in all seriousness, we'll dive into everything. Of course, as you can see, we'll talk about Tyron Johnson and all the other stuff. But first and foremost, have to give a shout out to our sponsors. Of course, we have Blue Wire Network, who we are proud to be a part of. Then we have Busser Sportsbook, who is the official sportsbook of the Guilty as Charged podcast, Manscaped as well, and of course the recent one, Backroom Collection. So he's got some fun stuff cooking up for the season as well. So make sure and support all of them. The links are in our description. So that being said, Tyler and Alex are here. Alex, we'll start with you. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good today. And so, for months on Twitter, I just saw, oh my God, Brandon Staley, his smile is so good during the press conferences. And then he cuts Tyron Johnson and you all go crazy. That's how I'm doing today. I just thought Twitter was funny.
Today's one of those days where you just don't put your phone down. And then of course the Chargers wait until 1:15 or whatever it was. Yeah. To freaking announce the cuts. And I'm just sitting there, refresh. But it was a fun day for sure. Tyler, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. That was still a fun morning. I got absolutely no work done. All I was doing, like you said, was just refresh, only to be somewhat disappointed. But at least the morning was surprising. There were some interesting things that happened. So that makes for fun conversation, which is, hey, that's good for us. So, Steven, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. I started my new job this week. So luckily today was not like a super busy day for me. I had a couple meetings here and there. But for the most part, I was able to sit on my phone and refresh Twitter. And then there was that one. I had one meeting right when Michael Badgley was cut, and that was about it. So I messaged Tyler and Alex. I was like, hey, you guys handle the podcast account. And then that was the only thing that I missed. So
you missed it just like Badgley.
I did miss it just like Badgley. Yes. I guess, we'll talk about the kicker battle down the road. So I'm sure everybody watching this obviously seeing all of the roster, but just wanted to mention them really quickly. Yesterday morning, the Chargers announced that they cut Devin Bellamy, Nate Evans, Darius Harper, John Hurst, Jesse Lemonnier, KJ Sales, Matt Sokol, Don Vaughn, Lee Yarberry, Cole Mazza, and Tyree St. Louis. And then, of course, today they announced they cut Michael Badgley, Michael Bandy, Darius Bradwell, John Brannon, Cortez Brown, Cole Christiansen, Ben DeLuca, Emeka Egbule, Braden Fehoko, Joe Gaziano, Nate Gilliam, Ryan Hunter, Tyron Johnson, Hunter Campmoyer, Jason Moore, and Joe Reed. So the Chargers 53-man roster is set. Let's talk about Tyron Johnson. I think that is the biggest one that everybody's really talking about. Before we talk about kind of both sides, I will say there was a lot of I can't believe they kept Tyron Johnson and Trey Pipkins. It's well, that's not really how the roster construction works. If they were going to keep Tyron Johnson, they would have had to cut a tight end or a running back or something else like that. You don't cut a skill player because you're keeping an offensive lineman. It doesn't really work like that. So, Alex, let's get your initial reaction here to cutting Tyron Johnson. And whether or not, what kind of ramifications you see from cutting Tyron Johnson.
So just to go through the 5 receivers really quick, it's Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Guyton, and
KJ
Hill. The last KJ Hill. Okay. So my initial reaction was surprised. I did not think that they were going to do it, but then I thought back to the post-game 49ers pod that we did. And we noted hey, this was kind of a stock down moment. I mean, he was playing deep into the 3rd and 4th quarter, catching weird screen passes. And of course, I actually missed the Daniel Popper piece, but he had mentioned that he had gotten into a fight with some 49ers DB and that pissed Staley off, I guess. And that, kind of event happened during the 49ers scrimmages. So I'm going to be on the record. I don't like the cut. And just in terms of, I think Tyron Johnson at minimum is the 4th best receiver on this roster. Not on the roster anymore. But when you consider these guys coming into the season, I thought that he was honestly better than Jalen Guyton and would put Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Josh Palmer ahead of him. But that's about it. I see why they did go with Guyton because he's their speed burner guy, and maybe it's redundant because you don't need 2 of them. But I've always thought Tyron Johnson is the more skilled one, especially when you consider Jalen Guyton's drop problem, which we don't know is fixed. So that was sort of my initial reaction to it. I'm not surprised, I guess, in the end of the day that they did that, because there was that blow up against the Niners, and we had sort of started to see Tyron Johnson's role reduce throughout training camp from that first week when it was, he was kind of the king of the world, was going to be wide receiver 3 to, where he is now, unfortunately. Yeah. I don't know whether he's going to clear waivers. I kind of doubt it, because he had 400 yards last year. So that, to me, doesn't seem like a guy who's going to make it through waivers. But if he does, I guess they could put him on the practice squad. But so my initial reaction was, to be shocked, then not shocked, and just kind of be disappointed. Now, as far as waiting for, Kareem C says to wait for a real explanation. I feel like we kind of have the explanation. The explanation was that, Brandon Staley didn't like his antics and he's gone. That seems like the explanation, at least to this point. And also he's an undrafted guy. Tom Telesco didn't put any capital into him, and so therefore he was easier to cut. So that's where I think we're at right now in terms of the Tyron Johnson cut. I don't like the decision. I don't think it's the end of the world. But I feel like everybody trying to say that Tyron Johnson wasn't super coachable and stuff like that, I feel like that's stuff that people are saying to kind of defend Brandon Staley today. And also, in terms of Tyron not lining up in the right spots and doing all of that, who were we saying that about 1 month ago? We were saying that about Joe Reed, and he was in a walking boot and nothing happened. So the fact that Tyron Johnson couldn't do that and had 400 yards last year, I can't get down with this cut. I get why they did it, but I don't support it.
Well, and the lining up wrong, KJ Hill did that several times in practice.
Exactly.
So I understand what Daniel Popper is saying, and that could have been an issue, but Tyron Johnson was far from the only receiver to make those kind of mistakes, and so I don't support it. I don't understand the rationale. I don't think you build a football team by cutting good players, and I understand some people trying to justify it, right? You have the 4 tight ends, or you have Kelley, or you have Stick, or whatever. But one of the things that we talked about, specifically for a guy like Eamon Ogbangbamiga or Cortez Brown, who we'll get to, is that you have to earn your spot on the roster. And that really is my biggest thing with the 2 quarterbacks at this point. I look at a team like the Rams who's keeping Bryce Perkins, or a team like the Falcons who's now keeping Josh Rosen. It's well, those quarterbacks earned a spot on the team. I don't really feel like Chase Daniel or Easton Stick really did enough to be okay, their spot is guaranteed. I still feel like it should be one or the other, and I feel like you should have kept Tyron Johnson. And so I am a little worried about the lack of speed. I think we've talked about Donald Parham and Jared Cook being different kind of fast from a different position, but still I think you need more than one speedster. And I know that Palmer isn't slow, and Keenan Allen's not slow, and Mike Williams is not slow, but you need more than one burner in the NFL these days. You need other players to stretch the field. And then if Jalen Guyton misses time, then you have no speed on the outside. So that's really my biggest thing in terms of the roster construction. I can't justify this cut, man. I really can't.
I would like a little bit more explanation from the coaching staff. I'm not going to freak out on them about it, but it's been a very interesting change of pace, thought, direction for, I'll just say Twitter or some of the comments, where suddenly Tyron Johnson, who everyone was pushing for wide receiver 3, if not next year's wide receiver 2, just a month or 2 ago, and now he's uncoachable. He's a problem. He doesn't line up in the right spots. Maybe those things are all true. I just feel like a lot of people are doing a 180 today based on the information to justify the cut. And I don't like the cut. If you feel like Johnson needs to be cut because you believe he's going to cost you games because of maybe poor football play, because of penalties, or because he doesn't know what he's doing, even if he isn't a starter, that's, I guess, somewhat understandable. But then you also have Trey Pipkins and Joshua Kelley on your roster. Are they not depth players that are also, on-field liabilities if they get on the field? Or, if you're keeping Kelley and Pipkins because of injury concerns in front of them, are you saying you're not worried about Mike Williams in front of Johnson? So the level of explosion in your roster drops significantly because you're going from one of the best deep and intermediate threats on the team in Johnson.
Yeah.
And then if Guyton gets hurt, you're dropping to KJ Hill? The goal, and the odd thing is the goal of this offense, truly in the whole offseason, was to ask and figure out what Justin Herbert does well and build around that. And he has a cannon of an arm and a natural connection with Johnson. So, and in this offense, unless you have both route running and some physical traits like Josh Ford-Palmer, where Hill doesn't have both of those things, this receiving core needs to be explosive. And they just took away one of Herbert's favorite weapons. So last year, Johnson had no drops last year on 26 targets, number one wide receiver on the team in yards per route run and drop percentage. And Herbert's passer rating when targeting Johnson was 56 points higher than the next best receiver on the roster. Then you have KJ Hill, which I get why he sticks on the team. They're not necessarily keeping him because they think he's a better receiver than Johnson. But then you look at the special team stuff. So KJ Hill was last on the team in punt return average this preseason and behind Joe Reed in kickoff return average. But of course, that job's going to Adderley and Roundtree in some combination. But he's only a slot guy. He only played 82% of his snaps in the slot. He is dead last in yards per route run this preseason and has the worst passer rating when a quarterback has targeted him this preseason by 55 points. His passer rating when quarterbacks target him is 12, and he has generated 1 first down. But that's the absurdity of keeping KJ Hill, which I mean, again, keeping him is okay, but then also letting Tyron Johnson go while keeping him is absurd to me. I don't understand it. Again, maybe there's a bigger explanation. I'm not saying this is the same thing at all, but I remember when they didn't bring back Darius Philon, we're like, why? Why would you let him go? And then you find out like in a week that he has some legal issues. I'm not saying that's the same thing for Johnson, but I'm just saying there is possibility there's something we don't know. But for right now, based on what we know, this is a shocker and a surprise, and to me, a disappointment.
I just want to jump in real quick and say to Tyler's depth point, right? We were kind of all expecting them to keep 6, and now they keep 5 with Mike Williams, who has been in and out of games, and Keenan Allen, who's been hurt, right? So, to me, not just cutting Tyron Johnson, but deciding to only keep 5 receivers is kind of, a stunner.
Yeah, I can't justify it in any way, man. It doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like this is kind of the equivalent of the Lakers choosing to keep Russell Westbrook instead of trading for Buddy Hield. In the NFL, you need speed to open things up. You have Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer who are going to feast over the middle, but you need people to take the top off to take attention away from them. It's the equivalent in the NBA of not having enough shooters. You need that spacing. So I don't know. I don't get it. I've seen some people say to Tyler's point, there has to be something going on. He must be a bad team. We don't know any of that until we hear about it from someone, until we hear about it from the team. Do not jump to conclusions. Everything that we've heard about Tyron Johnson has been that he's been a great teammate to everybody on the team. Yeah. So we do not know. So I would invite everybody to not really speculate. And of course, they could certainly make some moves to, replace a KJ Hill or add someone down the road. The Bears cutting Daz Newsome today, is ridiculous. If the Chargers could pounce on that, I would be thrilled. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I don't know, man. I just don't get it. And some people are like, well, maybe he'll get on the practice squad. And again, I say speed is everything at the wide receiver position, specifically at the depth. There are so many teams that could use a Tyron Johnson. So I do not expect to see Tyron Johnson back on this team in any capacity.
And if supposedly the reason they cut him is the reason that they cut him based on sort of what we know, why would they bring him on the practice squad? I don't think they're going to cut him for character concerns and then bring him back. It's not like they traded Desmond King and then re-signed him this offseason. They let him go and he's gone. So if that's the reason that they let him go, he's not coming back. That's it.
Yeah, so that is definitely something to monitor. Let us know, guys. Again, we're here to answer some questions as well. So if you do have questions,
console you.
I mean, Tyler's mom is a therapist. I'm a school counselor. Between the two of us, we could probably work it out.
You can't afford my mom.
Let's talk about the defensive tackle group because I think it definitely surprised us. that they chose Forrest Merrill over Cortez Brown and Braden Fehoko. Shout out to Forrest. Like, that's a super cool story. I'm excited to see how it pans out, and I hope it does. But I have to say, I was pretty surprised that they did choose to cut Cortez Brown and Braden Fehoko. I thought that one of them really kind of earned their way onto the team. But Forrest Merrill was great this preseason. He is a run-stuffing nose tackle. And so we've kind of been a little concerned, like what happens if Linval Joseph misses some games, and Christian Covington could play nose tackle. But now you have your, for sure, nose tackle depth behind Linval Joseph and Forrest Merrill. So Tyler, we'll start with you. What do you make of that decision and the decision to cut Cortez Brown and Braden Fehoko?
At least unlike a lot of the offensive players who got positions or got jobs that they really didn't deserve, like Forrest Merrill did deserve this. Now, do I think he's better than the other two options that they let go, or three, I guess? Maybe, maybe not, but I do think he deserved it at least. And, to the point of him being the primary backup to Linval Joseph, he did play the most A-gap snaps with 28. The next closest was Fehoko with 23. So pretty close, but they did give him the most run at that spot. But the odd thing is, in terms of total snaps, he played less snaps than the big three defensive tackles that they cut. And then he was fourth of the four in pressures. And then he was tied for third in run stops. Then he was behind Fehoko in both categories. And granted, it wasn't a lot. It was like 4 versus 3, 5 versus 4.
Sure.
But to me, like, they were pretty equal. And so if one guy is slightly better and he's the veteran, it was surprising that they still went with Merrill over Fehoko. And again, maybe Staley just really wants his guys that were not part of the previous regime, which again is counterpointed by Joshua Kelley and Easton Stick and Trey Pipkins. But hey, good for him. The surprise one was definitely Cortez Brown. I don't understand Craig. Gosh dang it, Craig. Cortez Brown not making it is interesting because he does hold that draft pick status, even though it was a 7th round draft pick. Mm-hmm. He was, I think, statistically and pretty easily the best defensive tackle of the preseason and during the offseason and training camp. Outside of the 3 main starters, it seemed like Broughton was the most productive and getting the most like run with either the first team or early on with the second team. So that was definitely a surprise. And look, I get that they think that they need, and they do. They did need another nose tackle behind Linval Joseph. It's just surprising that they would also let go a really, really disruptive player who, again, it's just the preseason, offseason, but it seems like Cortez Brown is finally living up to his draft billing. You've been developing him for years, and he's looking really good, and then you cut him. So I was like, what was the point? Like, he was inactive a lot last season. So why did you keep him around? I don't know. I think Brown deserved to stay on the roster. We can talk about the players that don't deserve it on the offensive side, but real surprise that Broughton was let go. Not a huge surprise that Merrill made it over Fehoko, although Fehoko was statistically superior. But I'm happy for Forrest Merrill no matter what.
I'm happy for Forrest Merrill. I think that he's a great person. He's a great run stuffer. This is a bad decision. I just can't get behind it. Look, Cortez Broughton played his ass off this preseason. He's been in the system, really for this is going into his 3rd season. And I thought he really showed a leap this preseason in terms of what he could do as a pass rusher, in terms of what he could do as also a run defender, right? Even Braden Fehoko, who I think has been in the system for a year and started to show some improvement, this preseason, has that experience in playing in, he played in 2 games last year, right? The Buffalo and the New England one. So I get the Merrill thing, but he doesn't provide any value as a pass rusher, which I think is important, right? Like, he's going to be a good run stuffer, like that I have no doubt about. But I do think they need a little bit more juice there. Like, okay, you got Joey Bosa and you have Uchenna Nwosu and Kyler Fackrell, and they're going to be relying on their edge guys. But in terms of their, interior guys that can create consistent pass rush pressure, it's, Justin Jones isn't quite that yet. Linval Joseph can do it a little bit. He had 20 pressures last year. Jerry Tillery's not really consistent at doing it. And Covington and Merrill are just sort of, kind of the rotational big body guys. I think Covington can create some pressure with the guys he's around. But Merrill over Broughton and Fehoko is perplexing to me. I don't really get it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I think from a run stuffing standpoint, sure. And as Arjun points out, you probably are not going to see Linval or Forrest Merrill on third downs very much.
Yeah, no, I don't.
And that's totally fair. I don't know. Like I think Covington as a run stuffing defensive tackle is plenty as the backup, because theoretically you have Linval and Justin Jones. So between the three of them, like I totally get that. And then so basically your one pass rushing defensive tackle is Jerry Tillery, who needs to be more consistent for sure. So I just personally would have cut Cortez Brown, but it is what it is. To Tyler's point, it is interesting that Daniel Popper pointed this out too. There's 21 players on the 53 that were not on this roster last year. And so it is kind of interesting that some players from the previous regime were cut, and then others from the previous regime who were bad were kept. To me, if you're going to cut some players from the previous regime, you cut the bad ones. You cut the Joshua Kelleys, you cut the Trey Pipkins, and then you keep a Cortez Brown who's playing well. So it's just an interesting dynamic there. Some people are mentioning you have Tom Telesco making decisions and Brandon Staley, but at the end of the day, whoever is on the roster is a collaborative experience between Staley and Telesco. It is. I don't believe that there's meddling going on. I believe that Brandon Staley has final say in whoever was on the roster, and we saw that with the coaching staff, right? Everybody kind of assumed that this front office would kind of force coaches on Brandon Staley, and the only one who stayed is the defensive tackle coach, Giff Smith. So I don't buy that there was meddling going on. I think Brandon Staley had a say in every single decision. It just is an interesting dynamic that certain players from the previous regime were cut, and that's why they were cut, and then other players who were bad were not cut.
Well, and I think that's where Telesco comes in. I mean, because the reason Joshua Kelly's still here is because he was drafted in the 4th round. I mean, the reason that Trey Pipkins was here is that he was drafted in the 3rd round, right? I'm not saying that's the only reason they're here, but the reason that I believe Telesco views Tyron Johnson as more cuttable, and some of these other guys as more cuttable, including a Cortez Brown and all those guys, is because they were lower round picks, right? Fehoko was undrafted, Tyron's undrafted, Cortez was 7th round pick 2 years ago, right? So I guess I would just say I don't think it's a meritocracy. And I think in terms of where these players were kind of at coming into this offseason, it's just, a little bit befuddling to, see. It's a little bit befuddling just to see, the favoritism towards the Tom Telesco draft picks versus the guys, he didn't put as much care into. I mean, I believe that's absolutely what happened. Now the Tyron Johnson fight in practice that complicates things. But, to me, I think Joshua Kelley and Trey Pipkins and all those guys still being on this roster is because of where they were picked. And I think that's essentially it.
The depth is just so disappointing because, I mean, what would the Seattle game have looked like if, I don't know, Tyron Johnson wasn't on that field, for example? That game was ugly to watch, but at least Tyron Johnson was doing okay. And I watched that team and at least the last 2 games against the Niners and the Seahawks. I thought, man, if all the starters are healthy, maybe they could contend for a Super Bowl, but you need depth. And most of these guys you're seeing right now are going to play, and they're getting whooped by the Seahawks right now. And then they let go of their best depth players. It's just not all of them, but most of them. And I don't know. It's really confusing to me. Some people are talking about a lot of different things. That this is the initial 53. This will not be the roster we go into game 1 with. We are signing and releasing players. I don't know. I really think they're kind of stuck with who they got. And that's outside of punt returner. I feel like this is kind of it, right? I mean, who else are they really going to add anybody at this point?
I mean, they could add waiver guys. And I mean, if you look at the roster last year, right, I think they actually cut Gabe Neighbors last year. And then he got promoted weirdly because they actually cut both fullbacks. So, I mean, you can look at spots on the roster of guys that might be different by week 1, or obviously Tyron Johnson, rest in peace, King, was not on the initial roster and then comes in October. So, I think there's instances like that where guys will come up on the practice squad or guys will get plucked off of other practice squads. I'm sure whenever the practice squad comes out, we'll talk about it. But I do agree that this is the initial roster, but they made mistakes on the initial roster.
Well, okay, so practice squad is practice squad. That's a whole different story. I'm just talking about like the 53. So, I mean, who would they add? Like, okay, so to me, you cut Tyron Johnson because you needed to keep 3 quarterbacks, right? Let's say that Tyron Johnson was the cut you had to make to keep Easton Stick on the roster. So who do you add then? Who gets knocked off? I feel like Joshua Kelley had to stick on the roster because they felt that way. But Trey Pipkins had to stick on the roster because they felt that way. Who do you get rid of? Are you trading someone out for Kelley? I mean, did you get rid of Braden Fehoko just to keep Kelley, just to get rid of Kelley to get somebody else? Why not just keep Cortez Brown? Why did you keep Easton Stick if you're just going to get rid of him? I don't know. It doesn't really add up to me. I just don't think that there's going to be any significant additions at this point outside of the practice squad.
No, I think like we might see like a minor change here and there before the first game, and like that's fine. Like I think we could see them move on from KJ Hill. I think that is a possibility. Because like it's so weird. The KJ Hill thing is so weird because we haven't really heard like anything in terms of like buzz or positive feedback, and then it's like, oh, he's our 5th receiver and only punt returner. So that could be something. I would absolutely love for them to go get Tyrell Crosby, the offensive tackle from the Lions. Obviously has several connections on the Chargers, played at Oregon with Justin Herbert, played on the Lions with Ode Abushi and Chase Daniel. So I think that makes a lot of sense. In that instance, you cut Trey Pipkins and you sign Tyrell Crosby. But that's not really something that I think happens. I think if there is a move before the first game, it probably is at receiver to try and fill, some speed void and punt return void. But that really is the only change that I personally could see out before the first game.
Yep.
But the rest it's all going to depend on injuries. Like I think, right now we're assuming that Justin Jackson is healthy, but what if he's not? What if he goes on injured reserve in the next couple of days? Then they have to add someone there. So that's why you keep Joshua Kelley instead of somebody else. And we have to talk about Ryan Smith too, because Ryan Smith is not on the initial 53. Daniel Popper seemed to think that he's making his way back from being on the COVID list. I don't know. Brandon Staley's talking right now to the media, so I don't know if there's been an update on his core injury. We don't know if he's still injured or not, but he is still on the COVID list. So if he comes back in the next couple of days, then they have to cut somebody else, which I think we kind of all agree is going to be Keemon Hall or Tavon Campbell, but it's probably going to be Hall.
Brandon Staley on keeping Trey Pipkins. He has to improve, but he gives us depth at that position that we need. So what we expected.
Thank you, Brandon. Very cool.
Very cool. That's your thing today, Alex. Very cool. All right, let's talk about some players that were happy about making the roster, because I feel like we need to spread some positivity a little bit today. I'm really excited for Amen Ogbongbemiga. I had him making the roster. And so part of it, of course, is me, predicting something that came true, which was like the only real thing that I predicted that came true. But I'm excited for him. I think he brings value to this team. I think he's somebody that can kind of be Murray's, depth piece, if you will, as a linebacker who can really shoot the gaps, make some plays as a run defender. And Brandon Staley mentioned that he has been a big fan of his communication. He's been a big fan of what he's done on special teams. So I think Ogbongbemiga and that selection should be celebrated more than it is right now. I understand all the Tyron Johnson stuff is kind of dominating the headlines, but I'm really excited about Amen Ogbongbemiga. I think he brings some good value to this team, and of course keeps the undrafted free agent streak alive along with Forrest Merrill. So I'm really excited about Amen and his future on the team for sure.
It was definitely nice to see him make the team, and yeah, again, keeping that streak alive is awesome. It really seems like, based on, not that Ogbongbemiga is unimportant, but okay, so like someone like Ogbongbemiga and Keemon Hall, in terms of the defense, I don't think they would have had a bigger role than someone like Fehoko or Broughton. I think they potentially could have been inactive most days, but I do think that they believe that Ogbongbemiga and Hall are more important on special teams, and that's some of the ways that I can justify some of the cuts that they made. I guess like cutting Tyron Johnson, because Tyron Johnson doesn't really contribute on special teams. But good for Ogbongbemiga. And, people are going to learn how to say his name. And, I've done pretty good so far. I think we're only 2 or 3 misses so far in this entire podcast. But good for him. Like you said, a primary backup to Kenneth Murray, which means, of course, Nick Niemann will be more your Drew Tranquil, Kaiser White kind of backup. I don't exactly know Obviously, during the scrimmage, Ogbongbemiga came in first before Neiman came in when Murray got hurt. I'm curious if that will still hold in the regular season. I'm just a little surprised that they went ahead and kept Ogbongbemiga, who must have had a much better training camp than we all saw, because he didn't get a ton to see we didn't get to see him a ton in the preseason. And even in that first game, while he made some plays, there were some rough coverage issue things as well.
Sure.
But either way, good for him. I'm glad he made the roster. And, I guess if you're looking at guys who, what guy, if he went to waivers, would be picked up the quickest, I think he's one of them. So I understand why they kept him. And, good for them. Good for Ogbongbemiga, good for Hall, good for all these guys.
I'm really pleased that Easton and Stick made the roster.
The positivity only lasted like 5 minutes.
I'm happy Michael Badgley's not here anymore. I mean, I guess we should talk about that.
There we go. Yeah, that's another one along with the quarterback side. I didn't really feel like Vizcaino, or are we saying Vizcaino now because that's what Gilbert Manzano said on CBS?
Wait till what Romo says, and then we'll just go with that.
There we go. All right. Well,
Vizcaino.
I mean, that's how you would say in Spanish. I just don't know if he's, Hispanic or not. But
he's Irish or something.
I know. But yeah, I didn't really feel like either kicker really won. It felt like they were pretty even kicking balls. It was just that, Vizcaino was the better kickoff man, which I guess that's a reason to keep your kicker, but I don't know, man. It's tough. Of course, the Chargers have options, and this could be something that they address this week, bringing some tryouts for, a Joey Sly, a Nick Folk, who were recently cut, and that kicker in Baltimore who, lost to Justin Tucker. So if the Chargers want to address this position now, like, they have some options, but Tristan Muskaino for now is the Chargers kicker.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it was the right decision between these two guys. I don't think anybody enthusiastically won the kicking competition, but Muskaino was the better kicker throughout camp. Did miss that 47-yarder, unfortunately, in the Seattle game. But, I felt like this was coming when they put Muskaino first in the Seattle game, and then, on the depth chart did not have Badgley taking any kickoff duties. So nothing in that department had changed. And we knew Swinton's comments before. So to me, it was pretty obvious that Vizcaino was going to be the kicker. Now, I don't think it stops them from eventually bringing in a Joey Sly or a Nick Folk or somebody like that.
Sure.
But I think that'll come after. If Vizcaino misses a kick, then, maybe you get some other tryout guys in. I think that's still a possibility down the road, just because nobody enthusiastically won this competition, and somebody could always, you could always miss kicks during a game. Now, obviously, we hope that doesn't happen. I hope Vizcaino is the kicker till the end of the season, and he makes all his kicks. That'd be great. Maybe me and Tyler should do another P.F. Chang's bet now that Michael Badgley's gone. But, I do want to see Vizcaino succeed. I mean, because his success is ultimately the team's success and all that. It's such an important position. So I hope it works out. I think it was the right decision over Badgley, but kind of a TBD.
Yeah, it was the right decision. And even if you could say that Badgley goes out and maybe makes 3 more kicks than Vizcaino, or is 5% better than Vizcaino, sorry. Just being able to hold off guys on kickoff returns and allow your defense to start in a good spot, or not allow returners to get to the 40. I think even if Badgley makes 3 more field goals, and gets 9 more points than Vizcaino, then, I'd rather keep Vizcaino, because he can at least, help your defense out a little bit. I'm curious how many points teams were able to score because they started at the 40 or the 45. I believe it's during most of the season last year with punt returns and kick returns. Obviously, he doesn't do punts. But with punt and kick returns, I believe the average starting position for the opposition was like the 30 or 35 or something like that. And so just being able to keep guys, at the 20 or at most the 25 just because it's a touchback, I think that's kind of like a hidden win, I guess. And then also, at the end of the day, I hope they go for it more often. I think they're going to go for it more often, and you just need the guy for the 55-plus yarders. And Badgley can't do that, and at least Vizcaino gives you some sort of shot. So I think they made the right choice here, but I'm not super enthused. I'm wondering how long fans, but be the coaching staff, I'm wondering how long they're going to let him be bad potentially. Like, I don't know if Telesco is quick to pull the trigger here. Do you trade? Do you cut? Talk about like Young Hui Koo, who went through 3-4 games and then they just like cut him, even though the last game that he played, he was technically perfect. So I don't really understand what happened there. But how long do you let these guys go for? Because A, you've seen Koo go off and have an amazing career after cutting him so quickly. And then B, they cut some other kickers before very quickly, or punters very quickly, and they never really figured things out during the season, and they're just being as bad or worse. So I'm really curious how long they're going to let this guy go for. And if Batchley doesn't, get picked up by another team, and he probably won't unless the Lions pick him up, I'm curious if they give him a call eventually.
I just wanted to respond really quick to the whole Badgley's going to become the next Koo or the next Lambo. I'm like, he can't kick to the 5-yard line. We asked him to do one thing, and he cannot do that. No touchbacks. Now, he does have the 59-yard field goal, but he's been 16 of 28 for 2 years. He's barely a 57% kicker from 40 yards out. Please stop with this. He's going to become the next Justin Tucker, because he's not going to, and he sucks.
Yeah, I think there's a real difference between his skill set translating to another team versus Koo or Lambo, because when you're a kicker, if you have a strong leg, you can work on accuracy issues, but you can't teach somebody to have a stronger leg like Michael Badgley. So I'm not too worried. I hate those conversations anyway. Like, once they're off the Chargers, they're off the Chargers to me. So I don't really care anymore. But in terms of this guy, I think he does get a longer leash. I think he is somebody who has that ability to kind of make an impact, but it's definitely TBD. Did you have something else?
Yeah, clarification on Ryan Smith. Gilbert Manzano just tweeted that in his press conference, Brandon Staley said he's a possibility to go on short-term IR for with the core muscle injury. Ryan Smith.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense. I mean, we kind of assumed that was going to be the case a few weeks ago, because he hasn't practiced since the first weekend of training camp.
Yeah.
So he's also got to work into shape. All of these practices and scrimmages and preseason games have happened, and he hasn't played. So putting him on injured reserve, letting him work back into shape makes total sense. The injured reserve rules are just like last year, so he could theoretically come back in week 4 for the Raiders game after he works himself back into shape a little bit. So he has to miss at least 3 games if he gets put on injured reserve. If they put him on the PUP list, that's 6 weeks, I believe. But if Staley's already saying short-term IR, then that seems like a good call. And that gives Keeman Hall another, a little bit of a runway to kind of, establish himself. And then if Keeman Hall looks really good, and then they don't need Ryan Smith, then they can cut him later on. So I think placing Smith on injured reserve makes all the sense in the world.
If Keeman Hall has a really, really good start to his season, who would you cut, I guess, instead of Hall? Who would be the first casualty?
Probably Tavon Campbell or Faison then.
Okay. I'm just curious if it wouldn't be like a Ogbong Bamiga, which I don't think it would, but I don't know how.
No, I don't think they would carry 7 corners. 7 corners kind of seems a little redundant to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so does 4 running backs and 3 quarterbacks, but here we
are. Good point.
Fair. All right, guys, if you have any questions, please let us know. Apparently, Gilbert only said Vizcaino once, and then the rest of it is Vizcaino. Someone just needs to tell us how to say it.
I'm just going with whatever Romo says week 2 at the Cowboys game.
There we go. Tony Romo is the expert on linguistics and phonetics, apparently.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But let's talk about some guys that we want to see return on the practice squad. I think John Brannon is kind of the first one that comes to mind for me. I totally understand why they cut him. I think that room is kind of a little crowded and they wanted a little bit more flexibility. But I want to see John Brannon stick on the practice squad. I really believe that all those interceptions in practice were not a coincidence. So I think John Brannon will be somebody that I would start with the practice squad.
So just to clarify, Hunter Kampmoyer is going to be the first Charger on the practice squad that we know of as of now. That was confirmed earlier today. In terms of the guys that they cut, I mean, it's just all the guys that, we kind of liked that, could get to the practice squad. I could see Broughton getting back perhaps there. I mean, that would be nice if he was there just for kind of security's sake. Tyron Johnson, I doubt is going to, possibly be back on the practice squad, especially with what we know. So, I mean, after that, I think it really just comes down to some of the guys that were close but didn't make the roster. Obviously, you'll have to have some offensive linemen. So maybe that's where Ryan Hunter, Nate Gilliam comes in. Gilliam was, on the practice squad for large portions of last season. So I think that's always a possibility. As far as some of the other guys, kind of brain farting right now in terms of who they cut, because it's all still there. I mean, Emeka Egbule is a guy that I'd like to see on the practice squad if he's not picked up. Reaffirms the edge depth. So I think those are kind of my guys, at least at the time being. Y'all have to have some receivers there, so it wouldn't shock me if a Jason Moore went there, maybe.
Yeah.
Potentially Joe Reed. Yeah, Joe Reed maybe. If they want to see him work himself back into shape, maybe just let him do that on the practice squad. But that's sort of the guys that I think. And then, of course, we have Tyler's guy, Ben DeLuca.
Well, I think you took everybody, so I don't know who else I'm supposed to root for.
Cole Christiansen.
There you go.
Darius Bradwell.
I thought Christensen had like a mini chance to make the roster because he was actually healthy. He was playing. He had plenty of tackles. He was kind of everywhere. What was the questions? Where did the receivers coach from last year go? Is he not working right now?
I think he's still unemployed. Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Because I figured that would be a guy who pick up
McGee. I think it's McGagan.
McJogan.
I don't think that's what they said on Hard Knocks.
Oh, well, what do we know? Everyone needs a simple name.
Wait, is he?
I don't think he's coaching anywhere. I think he's just still. I don't think he ever got back into coaching. The Raiders cut John Brown. That's an interesting one, but for a wide receiver 5 and 6, you need special teams, value, and I don't think that's John Brown.
Their receiving core stinks, man.
The Raiders,
Ruggs, Renfro, Edwards, they cut Brown.
There. Yeah,
it was Aguilar. Man.
Oh, John Brown asked for his release. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Gus Bradley's going to put in that phone call to Tyron Johnson.
Oh gosh,
he's going to the Chiefs or the Ravens or the Patriots or something, right? Like he's going to go to a great AFC team and kill it.
Yeah, like that's the player to me that I'm worried about, like going elsewhere and killing it. I'm not Michael Badgley going somewhere else and killing it. I think there's a difference. Kevin Kurdick, if Smokey Brown, John Brown can't fit in Las Vegas, T. Billy ain't going there. I think that's more of Brown not really wanting to be a backup versus like a skill set. They have Henry Ruggs. Like, if you want some more speed, you might as well get some Tyron Johnson. And again, when you have somebody like a Darren Waller who's going to eat over the middle, you got to have speed to take off the top. So we'll see. I think if there's somebody that Gus Bradley would take, it'd probably be like a Braden Fehoko or maybe an Emeka Egbule because they need edge rusher help still.
Was Christensen on the roster last year?
Yeah, but he was just mostly a special teams guy. Okay. And, when I did the training camp, like my initial 53-man roster after the first weekend of practices, I put Christiansen in there because he was working with the first team special teams. Because hadn't seen enough of Eamon Ogbogbemiga yet. So I don't know. The Saints don't have any receivers. Yeah, that would be a really good spot for Tyron Johnson. Because we know that Jameis is just going to chuck the ball down the field. So that's another good fit.
Everyone could use them. There's not a team out there that could not use Tyron
Everyone
Johnson.
could use them except for the Chargers, apparently.
Yeah. Man, there were some weird receiver cuts today. My guys, all my sleepers from this draft all got cut.
Right?
Des Fitzpatrick, except for Josh Palmer, obviously. Des Fitzpatrick, Cornell Powell, and Daz Newsome all got cut today. I understand why they cut Powell. That's not really their style of receiver in Kansas City, but the Bears need receivers. So them cutting Daz Newsome just doesn't make any sense. And then the Titans traded like 3 picks to go get Des Fitzpatrick, and then they cut him. So those two didn't make any sense to me.
What a bummer, man. I think that when we did our wide receiver episode, those were our 2 sleepers. I think you had Fitzpatrick and I had Newsome. and they're both gone. So,
No.
I mean, again, it'd be great to pick them up, sure, but I would rather just kept Tyron Johnson. So I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah, like I guess if you go get Daz Newsome, right, then your punt returner situation is solved because he was an explosive punt returner in college. I don't know if he did that for the Bears much, but at least in college, like he showed the skill set to do it. And he can do the same, like in terms of like the slot stuff, like he can do all the same things that KJ Hill can, but he's just faster. So, Mina Kimes also suggested Tyron to the Saints. Yeah, that makes sense. Tyron to the Lions. Yeah, that would.
Tyron and Tyrell killing it together with Anthony Lynn. Huh?
Yes, no doubt. There's a quote that I saw that I wanted to go back to, and now I can't find it.
Any idea what it's about?
No, I like scrolled past it, and I was like, "Oh, I'll go back there," and then I didn't see, and then I don't know.
All right, we need some new questions then, guys.
Send us some questions, guys. We'll be on here for like 10 more minutes ish. So if you have any questions, let us know.
Don't forget the super chat feature.
I would like to say that Jalen Guyton deserves a little more credit than he's getting. I still do think he actually is wide receiver 3 in terms of snaps, but we'll see. I know everyone kind of remembers him from last year. I personally wasn't a fan of him, but I think he's improved. He's a big part of their offense, and I think people should try to move forward with how they view him rather than just look back at the past, because I do think he's taken some steps forward.
Yeah, that's the thing is like it feels like Jalen Guyton did beat him out. Like it's not just him, Tyron Johnson getting cut. I wanted them to keep both, obviously, but it does feel like Jalen Guyton did beat him out. So we had a few questions here. Scroll across the screen, Alex. Which one do you want to talk about first?
I was talking about Todd asked which team will have more Chargers on their 2021 roster, the Lions and the Raiders.
Well, the Raiders have Casey and Denzel Perriman and Rod Teamer,
and
the Lions have Tyrell. Right? Is that it? That's
Do they have more? I'm gonna look up the Lions roster. This is really exciting.
While Alex is looking that up, we can talk about the Cam Newton thing. It was definitely surprising that they cut him after being, the starter all year long. But, I mean, it seems like the right decision. Like, I think, Mac Jones really fits their style again. It seems like they really did kind of a 180 when they signed Cam Newton last year. Did a lot more power stuff, a lot more running stuff. But Mac Jones, I think, just gives them a more stable presence at the quarterback position. Plus, Cam is not vaccinated. He's not going to get vaccinated. He's already had COVID last year, had a COVID protocol breach this year. So I totally understand Bill kind of not wanting to deal with that again and sticking with a young guy who I assume is vaccinated at this point. And I just think that Mac Jones is better for what they want to do.
Yeah. I mean, Mac Jones puts himself into kind of that rookie of the year contention. Been a long history of tall, awkward white guys coming in for black quarterbacks with medical snafus, winning rookie of the year. So, I mean, that's always a possibility. As far as Cam Newton getting cut, I mean, he had a kind of an incentive-based deal, I believe, right? So if he was on the roster and if he played in a couple of games, I think he could have made up to like $14 million. Versus if they cut him now, I think he's only guaranteed like 3.6. So I think that played into it probably in terms of the cap and stuff like that. And with what they have now, I think they did cut Brian Hoyer, but they have Jarrett Stidham, who's an okay backup anyway. So, sure. I mean, I don't know if you really need too much more than that. Obviously, they could scour the backup quarterback market and see what they find.
With Mac Jones, there really is no ceiling to have to wait to cultivate. Just throw him out there. Like he was supposed to be, in theory, the most NFL-ready quarterback because he just was kind of at his ceiling. And so, throw him out there. Craig, I see your comment. I can't think of something good to say about KJ Hill.
That was the question. Thank you. That was the question.
Yeah. Where'd it go? Where is it? Where'd it go?
Put it back.
It's
KJ Hill. What is it? He has the most receptions in Ohio State history. Bam. Positive.
That's really good. My middle name has a J. He's KJ. That's really good too. Hills are good. Good
His
for
last
exercise.
his last name isn't starts with an H. My last name starts with an H.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
I guess we should talk about this as well. How is Pipkins still on the roster?
I don't know why everybody kind of expected him to get cut. Like, none of us think he should be on the roster, to be clear. All three of us think he should have gotten cut. But if you're going to keep 9 offensive linemen, which is what Staley said, you keep 2 interior guys and you keep 2 tackles. So, he's one of those players that kind of just won his battle by default. It sucks, but like when you have a tackle like Brian Bulaga, you need to have 2 tackles behind him. So until they find someone better, Pipkins is what they have.
Yeah, and I also think Pipkins being on the roster kind of sucks, but it's different than it was last year where he was kind of like the last line of defense if Brian Bulaga went down. I think that they clearly at this point view Norton as a better option in that event. I think that they view potentially Jaime there as a better option, and then there's also the possibility of switching Filer there and putting Jaime in the interior, which is possible as well. So I don't think it's quite as bad as it was last year because I think Pipkins is going to have a bit of a reduced role in that sense. As far as him not making the roster, I mean, I kept saying again and again he's going to make the roster, and everyone was like, no, he's not, and then he did. So they're going to keep 9. If they find something better, Steven was talking about Tyrell Crosby for like 5 hours yesterday. So Tyrell Crosby could be that guy if they want to pick somebody off of waivers. But Pipkins was always gonna make the roster. I don't know what people were thinking.
Hey, you said that I was gonna have 25% of the show today to talk about Tyrell Crosby.
If we recorded 8 minutes, go for it.
If we recorded it yesterday, we would have been 25% of the show.
No, I think Tyrell Crosby, I fully expect him to sign elsewhere. I don't think he's gonna waiver. Albert Breer mentioned something in his Monday morning mailbag where it's like everybody in the league is feeling the lack of offensive line depth. It's a problem everywhere. Every team has the same problem the Chargers do. So I do expect Tyrell Crosby to make a roster elsewhere. But it just checks every box for what the Chargers need right now. I think you have Tyrell Crosby be the swing tackle this year. He's clearly better than Storm Norton or Trey Pipkins. And you could sign him to a multi-year deal too, because you have the kind of the uncertainty with Brian Bulaga. If Brian Bulaga stays healthy, great. You have a great swing tackle behind him. If Brian Bulaga doesn't stay healthy and you move on next year, which I think is more likely, then you have Tyrell Crosby who can kind of be that bridge tackle for a year too. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it should. And I think Tyrell Crosby would be an awesome upgrade.
Amen Brother asks, did COVID vaccination status play a role in any of these roster moves?
Somebody commented and said Tyron Johnson was considered a close contact and that he was on the COVID list for a bit. I don't recall what that was all about.
I don't think that was the case.
I mean, we don't know if any of these guys are unvaccinated or vaccinated other than the people that have told us, right? Like Justin Herbert. Yeah. So, I mean, it could have. I wouldn't be surprised. I did say on one podcast that I wouldn't be surprised if vaccination status determines wide receiver 5 versus wide receiver 6. And, if you're doing something like that. But, I have no idea if he's vaccinated, so I'm not going to speak on that.
It's going to be interesting. I know Sean McVay was pretty open about, I think he said that 52 of their 53 are vaccinated. I'd be curious to hear what the Chargers numbers are now, because I know it was pretty low there for a while. So I would be curious to hear an update there.
I think Sean Payton is still more pissed at Michael Thomas than any of the unvaccinated players combined.
True. This is an interesting question from Sergeant Romano. Does today make you a little more nervous heading into the regular season? And I'm going to say no. I know it's been kind of a negative day on Twitter, and I certainly do not like the Tyron Johnson move. But overall, I think there's kind of been a lot of negativity recently because we haven't seen the starting groups play very much at all. And so, that's really the biggest thing right now for me. For the most part, this team is really trending in a positive direction because the starters are healthy. This is going to be the first time in a very long time that we don't have any major injuries for week 1. And so while today was not necessarily great in terms of like the roster construction. There were definitely some questionable moves. I don't think it really changes how I feel about this team heading into the season.
I'm so proud of you guys on Twitter for being negative today. You really embraced your inner. You've embraced your inner Alex, so I'm proud of you. As far as does it make me nervous? Yes, in terms of depth, a little bit, right? When you talk about wide receiver, and I just specifically mentioned, Mike Williams injuries. Keenan Allen's had to miss a few games here and there, especially last year. It makes you a little bit nervous, but I'm not, losing sleep over it, I guess. The depth in certain areas of the roster, I think, could have been better if you decided not to keep 4 running backs and if you decided not to keep, 3 quarterbacks. But other than that, there's not like a specific player that got cut today that makes me nervous heading into the regular season now.
It's kind of the same for me. It's all about the starters. There's nobody that's the depth in this roster outside of maybe like Hymus and potentially Questenberry, that are really going to contribute. Otherwise, in terms of starting, it's the starters are bust. And if the starters are healthy, I feel great about this team.
Right.
It's just week 8, week 9, week 16, week 17, week 18. That's when I'm going to start worrying about the depth of the team. Although knowing the Chargers, I'm sure by week 4, we'll be regretting the depth of this team.
Right. And I just want to, also I've seen a lot of comments specifically about backup quarterbacks. Like if Justin Herbert goes down, this team is done. It's like, yeah, no shit. Of course, there's no backup quarterback that would make you feel comfortable with that happening. There's no backup wide receiver that makes you comfortable with Keenan Allen going down or any possibility, right? Derwin James. I do think like Tyler says, it's based on if the starters play and a lot of stuff like that and how many games they can play specifically.
Someone said that they'd rather have Cam Newton as the backup. That's a hard pass for me. Don't really think that's a fit for the culture.
I don't think there's any.
There's
no difference between him and Daniel at this point.
Do you think any bad guys were uncovered, as Staley said in the episode of All In?
What did he say? Staley said something along the lines of, we want these high character guys and great guys, whatever. But if we find out that you're some sort of bad guy or whatever, you're not committed to what we're doing.
Oh, that's right.
Something like that. Then we're gonna find you, because not like some crazy Spanish Inquisition thing or anything. It's just it'll come about. If you're a bad guy, you're a bad teammate, it's gonna come out. So it's an interesting thought considering Tyron Johnson. But again, I don't really buy that, the whole Tyron Johnson thing. He's the guy who went into Anthony Lynn's office and said, please play me, activate me on this roster. I want to get better. He did get better the entire year last year, and suddenly he's a bad guy. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the same thing as the COVID vaccination thing. That could be it. But until we know more, I don't know if I have a lot of room to speculate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not really comfortable making conversation about somebody's character when we don't know them. Somebody did ask about kick returners. That's going to be Nasir Adderley and Larry Roundtree. From what we've seen and heard so far, I think Roundtree kind of is the one who's going to do it the most, and I think Nasir Adderley is going to be used here and there, because obviously I think they want to kind of preserve him for playing defense. This is an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Max Roque wants to know, knowing what happened today with Tyron Johnson and assuming Mike Williams leaves next year, how confident are you guys with Josh Palmer as wide receiver 2 next year? I think this is obviously an important question, given Mike Williams' contract future and really his health is always a question mark. So Tyler, we'll start with you here. What do you make of Josh Palmer as wide receiver 2 next year?
If he is the wide receiver 2 next year, I feel good, because I do like him as a receiver and he's been outstanding. But then it's you kind of have 2 possession guys, and come on, we need somebody for Herbert here to throw it down the field. Not that you can't really do that with Allen or Palmer ever, but you kind of need somebody else. And I'm assuming this also means that Williams is gone. To me, with them losing Tyron Johnson and Jalen Guyton not being anything like Mike Williams, maybe they really do want to bring back Mike Williams next year, and they are certainly leaving the door open by moving on from Johnson. Now the options behind the starting 4 is KJ Hill, and he's not replacing Mike Williams, and Jalen Guyton isn't replacing Mike Williams. Not that Tyron Johnson ever had Mike Williams' skill set, but he at least was a downfield threat, and he had some athletic upside. which someone like KJ Hill doesn't. So to me, this just increases the chances of Mike Williams coming back. They really like him. They think he's going to have a really, really big year. So, maybe they really do think that Mike Williams is going to be and have a really, really good season, and that they're actually planning on bringing him back.
So, I mean, what I feel about him being wide receiver 2 next year kind of depends on what he does this year. I kind of need to see what he's going to do. I obviously buy everything we've seen in training camp so far, everything we've seen in the preseason. I think he's looked really impressive pretty much every game. So I definitely think he is getting better. Kind of a TBD for me. As far as is it less likely or more likely that Mike Williams stays, I don't really think Tyron affected it, because I believe Tyron was a restricted free agent next year anyway, right? And also Guyton is too, I believe. Right. So, you have Guyton, Johnson is out of the picture, but you have Guyton and Mike Williams who are going to be free agents next year. So, you're going to see who's going to kind of stay where. So, I don't think it really makes anything more or less likely, but in general, I feel cautiously optimistic about Josh Palmer potentially being wide receiver 2.
Yeah. I think in terms of like the roster construction, you can definitely make it work, with Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer as your 1 and your 2. In this scenario, if Mike Williams really does leave, then Jalen Guyton has to come back. Like Guyton has to be the wide receiver 3 again next year. And then they'll have to find a wide receiver 4 that can actually run fast and replace Tyron Johnson. So, in terms of Joe Reed, it really sucks. Like we just didn't really get to see him have a fair shake. That's another one I hope is able to come back on the practice squad. But, when you're somebody on the bubble and you get hurt that early in training camp, like it just, it sucks. But once he was in that walking boot, that was all she wrote, unfortunately.
They did Trey Pipkins dirty with a picture of him. It looks like this. That's his pass set where he's kind of like with his arms out wide like this. So I'm sure he's mid something important, but it's like wee. It's just so they did him dirty with that one.
As far as Joe Reed, I think that it really just came down to health. I think if he was healthy, we might have seen him as a wide receiver 6 this year. Like, I think that's very possible. Yeah. And I think that kind of played into the decision not to keep 6 receivers. It's unfortunate because now he's in a walking boot. Don't know when he's going to, be healthy. But that's one of the ways that I think you can kind of work him back is the practice squad. You can just keep him there. No one's really going to be in danger of like taking him off the practice squad because, he is injured. So you can just kind of keep him there and rest him until he's okay. I don't really know if he's in future plans or not at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I would like to see him come back on the practice squad, but we'll see. I think they have to wait 48 hours to make waiver claims and put people on the practice squad. So we'll talk about that probably on our Sunday episode. But that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. This has been a lot of fun, even though we kind of ranted a little bit about the certain roster decisions. We're going to have a fun interview for you guys that Alex and I are going to do here in a little bit. So stay tuned for that one. And then we're going to announce a little bit of a schedule change for the season and kind of go back to what we were doing last year. So we'll keep everybody posted there. But Tyler, Alex, any final thoughts before we head out today?
Nope.
I actually prepared a whole oh guys, this is the initial roster. Tyron Johnson was on the practice squad last year, and then he played for the team, and then Braden Fehoko. I was gonna do that whole thing, but then Tyron Johnson got cut and screwed my whole speech I was gonna give. So fuck it.
Yeah. I will not apologize to Dan Fouts because I still think he's bad at what he does. I just think he was told something and repeated it. I don't think he was right or wrong. He just happened to say something on the broadcast. Oh, you were watching the other broadcast, huh? On the local broadcast, he was like, "Yeah, we talked to Brandon Staley, and he said that Tyron Johnson was on the roster bubble." So,
okay.
I still think Dan Fouts doesn't know shit like about what's happening on the team. Like he just happened to get something out of Staley that day. But it is what it is. But yeah, that's going to do it for us today, guys. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you for tuning in. And this is the Guilty as Charged podcast signing off.